Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, presented by Amity University, ranked amongst the top 3% universities globally. Skoda, superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Победитель Владимир Владимирович Putin.
As a child, Vladimir Putin was bullied. As a KGB officer, he mastered the art of bluffing. And now, as president, he knows how to rule with an iron fist. He also likes to show off his skills at judo, skiing, swimming, horse riding. What he hasn't learned, it seems, is dealing with an opposition. However small, Putin has crushed the opposition in Russia. Perhaps for the first time in his 20-year rule, he's dealing with a situation like this. A man was poisoned, then jailed. Hundreds of his supporters have been arrested, but the protest is only spreading. 100 Russian cities and counting. Who is this man who has breathed life into Russia's long-dead opposition? The Kremlin calls him just another blogger. But in court, they guard him like he were a terrorist. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll tell you all about the great showdown in Russia and what it means for President Putin. Also on the show, Joe Biden outlining his foreign policy. He's reversed the U.S. stand on Yemen, sent a message to Putin, but no word on India. In Myanmar, students are at the forefront of protests challenging the military coup. We bring you a special report. Is Turkey swapping Uyghurs for Chinese vaccines? Why is Canada hoarding vaccines? And why do rich countries insist on a vaccine patent? We'll discuss. Also, China's new rules for Hong Kong schools, so that the next generation complies with and not challenges Beijing. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
The United Nations Security Council has called for the release of Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi and others detained by the military. The group has also voiced concern over the state of emergency, but stopped short of condemning the coup. Turkey has rejected international criticism of its crackdown on protests by students opposing the appointment of a government loyalist to head Istanbul's top university. It has warned countries to stay out of its domestic issues. According to a report by the United Nations released on Thursday, the leader of Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Yemen, Khalid Batarfi, has been under arrest for several months. The development is being seen as a major setback for Al-Qaeda and a huge breakthrough in the fight against global jihadist terrorism. It is the first official confirmation of Batarfi's arrest, which comes after unverified reports had surfaced. Batarfi was designated as a global terrorist by the U.S. State Department in 2018. The number of COVID-19 infections in Tokyo may have jumped 9-fold since last summer, according to a coronavirus antibody survey. This as Japan has tried to rein in the country's third and most lethal wave of the pandemic ahead of the Olympics in July. Pharma major Pfizer has withdrawn its application for emergency use authorization of its COVID-19 vaccine in India. The decision comes after a meeting with the Drugs Controller General of India. Indonesia has banned schools from forcing girls to wear Islamic hijab or headscarves after the case of a Christian pupil pressured to cover up sparked outrage in the world's most populous Muslim nation. The move has been applauded by rights activists. Tech giant Google has launched a platform in Australia offering news it has paid for, striking its own content deals with publishers. This is Google's drive to show that the legislation proposed by Canberra to enforce payments is unnecessary. There was mayhem in the Pakistan National Assembly as lawmakers from the government and opposition benches were seen heckling and shoving each other. Over a dozen security staff members had to surround the dais to guard Deputy Speaker Qasim Suri, who was chairing the proceedings. Joe Root became only the 9th player to mark his 100th test with a century as England took the honours on day 1 of the series opener against India in Chennai. Root shared a 200-run partnership with Dom Sibley for the 3rd wicket to help the visitors recover from 63 for 2. The England captain brought up a century of 164 balls and ended the day unbeaten on 128, but Sibley fell in the final over with the score on 263. Serbia's title defence at the ATP Cup has come to an end after defeat to Germany in a dramatic tie in Group A. Germany's Jan-Lennard Struff beat Dusan Lajovic in the opening singles, but world number 1 Novak Djokovic kept Serbia alive by coming from a set down to beat Alexander Zverev. However, Germany edged a close deciding doubles to set up a semi-final against Russia. Spain are also through to the last 4 and will face Italy.
For a month now, the world has been watching a showdown in Russia. The protagonists are 2 men. One has ruled Russia for 20 years, the other has become the face of the opposition. Vladimir Putin and Alexei Navalny. You could say there's no comparison and you'd have a point. The Kremlin dismisses Navalny as just a blogger. And yet this blogger, this critic, has campaigned relentlessly and given a new lease of life to the dying political opposition in Russia. Alexei Navalny gained prominence as a blogger and an anti-corruption activist. Today, the world's most powerful nations are backing him. He's behind bars and still poses a challenge to Putin. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll tell you all about this Russian showdown. Let's start with the latest. Navalny has been sentenced to 3 years in jail in an old case of parole violation. Today, he was back in court, though. Evidently, the Kremlin is not done with him. He's been charged in one more case. This one is for slander, for defaming a Second World War veteran. Navalny calls all charges trumped up. Be that as it may, he was back in a glass cage today, surrounded by prison guards. So much security for a man accused of defamation. You'd think Russian security officials are dealing with a terrorist here. You may be aware that Navalny was also poisoned by a nerve agent called Novichok. He was treated for weeks in Germany. Despite the obvious threats to his life, he returned to Russia on the 17th of January and went straight into a jail. The case was promptly taken up. Navalny was declared guilty and sentenced. His supporters were raided. Thousands took to the streets in more than 100 Russian cities. They faced a relentless crackdown without exception. Now, Navalny has been taken to court again. And all of this shows how paranoid the Russian establishment is. They're not used to opposition. This is the birth of an opposition movement in Russia. It poses a challenge for Vladimir Putin. Even in jail, Navalny remains in focus. Shortly before he went to prison, he made a statement before court. An audio recording of that has now gone viral.
И сколько бы он ни изображал из себя великого геополитика, великого какого-то такого мирового лидера, его обида главная в отношении меня теперь заключается в том, что в историю он пойдет.
Quite dramatic, but what next? The man is in jail. What is the strategy of his camp? One of his aides has said that they will not be calling for more street protests. They're regrouping before the nationwide parliamentary elections in September. The idea is to build pressure on the Kremlin and attack the legitimacy of Putin. Backing them are some foreign leaders. From U.S. President Joe Biden to French President Emmanuel Macron, leaders have called for the release of Alexei Navalny.
Mr. Navalny, like all Russian citizens, is entitled to his rights under the Russian Constitution. He's been targeted for exposing corruption. He should be released immediately and without condition.
I think this is a huge mistake, even for Russian stability today. So Navalny case is a very serious situation. We decided some sanctions, and I do regret and I do condemn these decisions.
Europe is serious about sanctions on Russia. Today, the European Union's top diplomat met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. He called on Moscow to release Navalny. Lavrov has dismissed the demand. He has termed the reaction from the West hysteria. A diplomatic fight is now underway. Today, Russia expelled diplomats from 3 European countries: Germany, Poland and Sweden. Why were these diplomats expelled? For attending rallies in support of Alexei Navalny, which is only fair. It's not usual for diplomats to lend support to domestic opposition leaders in a protest rally. But then again, can Russia complain about foreign interference after everything it has done? So Putin doesn't have many friends outside his country. At home, his ratings have tanked. According to the latest poll, only 29% of Russia trusts President Putin, a fall of 20 percentage points since Putin was re-elected in 2018. More unrest in Russia cannot be ruled out. There is plenty of fuel for public anger in this country. Let's give you some numbers to consider. Average disposable incomes have dropped by more than 10% from January to September last year. This signals a major slowdown in the Russian economy. Nearly 20 million Russians live below the poverty line, so the standard of living remains poor. This is the audience that Alexei Navalny tapped into with his documentary called Presidential Palace, a video that has now got more than 100 million views, 100 million. Navalny claims that the $1.4 billion palace belongs to Putin and was funded through corruption. The Russian president has denied all the charges, but Navalny's message seems to have stuck with the citizens of Russia.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is a thief and a murderer. I want Navalny to be free. First they attempted to poison him, now they want to put him in prison.
It's not right to detain a person illegally. I don't want this to continue in my country. It's not the first time we go through this. Therefore, I came here to support. They should see how many of us are here.
The situation is actually frightening, as it is illegal and it contradicts any possible laws in our country.
Those voices in support of Navalny are still in the minority in Russia, but they're enough to give the Kremlin a headache. The protesters may not be able to hit the streets right now, but they have taken to social media to show their support for Navalny. People have posted pictures wearing the color red to show their support for Yulia Navalnaya, the wife of Alexei Navalny. She has now become the face of this protest. Her favorite color apparently is red. This trend was started by a journalist who encouraged people to show solidarity for Navalny's family and the thousands of protesters who have been jailed. More than 10,000 of them have been detained in the last 3 weeks alone. 10,000. What you see on your screen now is a video from inside a jail in Moscow where many of the detainees have been jammed together. This facility was created to house immigrants. Now, people arrested for supporting Navalny are being kept here. A group of 20 packed into a small cell with substandard sanitation. According to one report, Moscow has run out of jails after the protests. Alexei Navalny is also a man who must not be named, at least not by Putin, who makes it a point to never use the name. But why does the Russian president care so much about a blogger? Why does he fear him so much? And what's Navalny's story? Here's a report that will tell you everything you need to know.
He is 44. He is popular. He has support abroad. His poisoning made him a household name. His dramatic arrest heightened his profile. And even in jail, he has outmaneuvered Vladimir Putin. But who exactly is Alexei Navalny? The son of an army officer. Navalny grew up in Obninsk, about 60 miles southwest of Moscow. He has a degree in law and spent time in the United States on a fellowship at Yale. In the year 2000, at the age of 24, Navalny joined the Russian United Democratic Party, Yabloko. 7 years later, he was expelled from the party for his overtly nationalistic activities. During anti-Putin demonstrations in 2011, he was among the first opposition leaders arrested. In 2013, he ran for the mayor of Moscow, but lost to a Kremlin-backed candidate. Since then, Navalny has been barred from running for office. Instead, he has turned his focus on social media to mobilize crowds of mostly young protesters. He is best known for producing detailed investigations into corruption. Investigations like "He is not demon to you," which accused former Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev of corruption. The case is solved. I know everyone who tried to kill me, which detailed his poisoning. Parasiti exposed Kremlin's control on the Russian media. And the latest being Putin's Palace, history of the world's largest bribe. Navalny has not just challenged Putin's leadership, but also his strongman image. He has single-handedly put Putin in a catch-22 situation. Letting Navalny walk out of prison comes with a huge cost. Keeping him behind bars is not helping either. And silencing him inside prison is not even an option. What about the Russian opposition? Navalny's case gave a new life to dying opposition parties. There are a total of 69 of them. But only 6 parties are represented in the Russian parliament, the State Duma. Putin's party, United Russia, is the largest faction with 343 of 450 seats. The second largest faction is the Communist Party of the Russian Federation with 42 seats, followed by LDPR with 40 seats, and a Just Russia with 23 seats among 2 others. The small numbers have made these parties a rubber stamp opposition. Putin's party holds the final say over the passage of any measures. To add to that, the ideological differences within the opposition makes the merger quite difficult. Alexei Navalny emerged as a unifying force. His witty posts, memes, pop culture references got the support of leaders across party lines. But now that he's in jail, the Russian opposition has once again lost its voice. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
At the turn of the millennium, a man not many had heard of took over the reins of Russia. Vladimir Putin became the Prime Minister of Russia in August 1999. He was a political nobody. Even to his wife, the appointment reportedly came as a surprise. Putin was handpicked by then-President Boris Yeltsin and the KGB. Within 3 months, Putin was handed the Kremlin on a platter. Putin was told he would succeed Yeltsin and lead Russia into the 21st century. Do you know why? Because Boris Yeltsin trusted only family and KGB. Putin is former KGB. The 47-year-old new president addressed the country wearing an ill-fitted suit. It took Putin's entourage well over a year to find him a suit that fits. It's been 20 years since the baton was handed to a camera-shy Vladimir Putin. A lot has changed since. This is Vladimir Putin today. The founder of the Strongman's Club, the longest-serving Russian leader since Joseph Stalin. Parallels are drawn between Putin and the Russian czars. Putin is everywhere in Russia, from T-shirts to calendars to mugs. He has transformed Russia into an increasingly dictatorial state where its people have fewer rights and freedoms. Putin has moved away from the West, embraced isolationism, annexed Crimea, fought in Ukraine, and despite everything, he remains Russia's most popular leader. This is only the fourth time that his ratings have taken a dent. Previously, it was because of unpopular reform to social benefits, rigged parliamentary elections and pension reforms. Today, some 46% of Russians aged between 18 to 24 say that they do not approve of President Putin. But do you know what? These numbers mean nothing. Just like Russia's recent referendum that allowed Putin to be president for life. And I will tell you why. The answer is fear. Russians do know that Putin is backed by the oligarchs. They have seen dissidents dying, disappearing, being drugged. The murder of former Russian spy Alexander Litvinenko in 2016 shocked the world. Rebel Chechen leader Zelim Khan Yandarbiyev was assassinated in Qatar. Sergei Skripal was targeted in Salisbury in the UK. All the trails lead back to Moscow. And the tale each time is of Russia's growing appetite for risk, Putin's growing appetite for risk. We often refer to Pakistan as a terror state. That it obviously is. But you know what? The Kremlin too has its own terror squad. It takes down dissidents at home and abroad. In the last 20 years, Putin has tightened his grip on power, changed the constitution to suit his dreams, and gone after anyone who came in between. Alexei Navalny was no exception. But what Putin did not expect or account for was for Navalny to outmaneuver him. Navalny used his recovery time to investigate attacks on journalists in Russia. He exposed corruption in Putin's system, detailed it all in a 2-hour documentary. Navalny also duped Russian agents into spilling the details of his poisoning. He returned to Russia despite the threats of an arrest. And in doing so, Alexei Navalny became a hero. The man Putin fears the most. Do you know why? Because Navalny kick-started what Putin fears the most. A Ukraine-style Maidan revolution from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Protesters have taken to the streets across Russia. Putin knows the threat that such protests come with. He knows that protests eventually topple the Tsarist rule too. Will Vladimir Putin meet the same fate? I highly doubt. Navalny definitely is the biggest challenge to Putin at home in his 20 years of leadership, but Vladimir Putin has been written off before too. Experts predicted that Putin would be mowed down by a crisis, just like Yeltsin. But Putin survived not only the war in Chechnya, but also the 2002 Moscow siege or the annexation of Crimea. Remember, we are talking about a man who orchestrated the Salisbury poisoning just months before the 2018 FIFA World Cup. He's not afraid of interfering with the elections of the world's oldest democracy or hacking into the servers of vaccine manufacturers across the globe. Yes, Navalny is definitely Putin's biggest test till date, but predicting a fall, Putin's fall, would be speaking too soon. America is back. This was Joe Biden's message to the world as he made his first diplomatic address as president, a message that signals a muscular foreign policy in the days to come. But was the message in touch with the current geopolitics, the geopolitical realities of today? In the next 4 minutes, we'll discuss. But first, listen to this.
America is back. Diplomacy is back at the center of our foreign policy. As I said in my inaugural address, we will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's.
You heard that? We will engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's. A message that heralds the prominence of American diplomacy. It reiterates the same role that America has played for decades, acting as the protector of liberty and freedom across the globe. That's the pedestal the U.S. has always put itself on. I don't say this without reason. In his address, Joe Biden made it absolutely clear that the world should expect a more diplomatically engaged America under his watch. He insisted that the U.S.'s global strategy will be based on liberal democratic values. Biden put adversaries on notice, lauded international cooperation and reassured allies of support. But he warned that his support will not be unconditional. We've compiled his message for each country. Take a look.
The Burmese military should relinquish power they have seized, release the advocates and activists and officials they have detained, lift the restrictions on telecommunications, and refrain from violence. This war has to end, and to underscore our commitment, we are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales. We're going to continue to support and help Saudi Arabia defend its sovereignty and its territorial integrity and its people. At the same time, I made it clear to President Putin, in a manner very different from my predecessor, that the days of the United States rolling over in the face of Russia's aggressive actions, interfering with our elections, cyber attacks, poisoning its citizens, are over. We'll also take on directly the challenges posed by our prosperity, security, and democratic values by our most serious competitor, China.
He asked the Myanmar military to relinquish power. He promised to end American support for the offensive in Yemen. He promised to help Saudi Arabia defend its sovereignty. He made it clear that America will not roll over in the face of Russian aggression. And he said that he will directly take on challenges posed by China. What about India? A long-time ally of America, the member of the Quad, one of America's most important partners, the new Vice President of the U.S., Kamala Harris, is half Indian. There are at least 20 Indian Americans in Biden's White House team, but the president made no mention of India, not once. How should New Delhi perceive this? Was the omission intentional? Well, I don't want to be making any assumptions. Biden has been a leader long enough to know how these things work. Historically, Democrats have been friendlier with India, no matter who's in power. From John F. Kennedy to Barack Obama, all American presidents have tried to improve ties with India. India also sits at the center of the strategic architecture the U.S. envisions for the Indo-Pacific region. New Delhi is Washington's biggest Asian partner. Their interests coincide as far as Chinese aggression is concerned. So Joe Biden's omission of India from the diplomatic address may or may not have been intentional. But it certainly raises questions. And he's not spoiled for choices when it comes to partners. Coming back to Chinese aggression, after Twitter and trade, the United States and China are now taking on each other in the high seas. China has warned of a U.S. warship sailing near contested islands in the South China Sea. This is the first such encounter between the two countries since U.S. President Joe Biden's inauguration. It comes a day after the U.S. announced the deployment of one of the world's largest warships to the Indo-Pacific. The Nimitz CVN-68 was keeping an eye on Iran for the last 10 months. It is now sailing towards China.
How do you gauge changing geopolitics? Sometimes it can be as simple as tracking troop deployment. This is the USS Nimitz CVN-68, the pride of the US Navy. It is over 332 meters long, has a 4.5-acre flight deck and can carry more than 60 aircraft. The USS Nimitz is one of the largest warships in the world. This supercarrier is now moving to the Indo-Pacific. Any idea why? China. The Indo-Pacific is witnessing growing Chinese aggressiveness. The Nimitz deployment is America signaling to Beijing. Nimitz will be the third American carrier group to enter these high seas. It will be placed with the Pacific Command. It's headquartered in Hawaii and has an operational field that covers over 50% of the Earth. Reports say the new Pentagon chief, Lloyd Austin, is planning a visit. During his Senate confirmation hearing, Austin said he wanted to visit the base as soon as possible. Here is another American supercarrier that's currently in the Indo-Pacific. The USS Theodore Roosevelt. It reached the South China Sea in January. It entered through the Bassi Strait, sailing between Taiwan and the Philippines. China responded to this by flying more than a dozen military aircraft over the Taiwan Strait. The USS Ronald Reagan too is in the region. It is undergoing repairs in Japan. The Nimitz carrier group was in West Asia for the past 10 months. It was keeping an eye on Iran. Its redeployment signals that the Biden White House views China as a bigger threat than Iran.
Not self-interest.
These are signs of changing tide. It sails home the point that when it comes to China, the Biden White House may be ready to go beyond tweets and tariffs.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Thank you for welcoming the Vice President.
Day 5 of the coup in Myanmar, the citizens are fighting back with internet blocked till the 7th of February. Protesters have taken to the streets. A group of teachers and students have even launched what they're calling a civil disobedience movement. Here's a report.
It has been 5 days since Myanmar's military overthrew the government and ended the country's 10-year dalliance with democracy. Myanmar has remained mostly calm in the aftermath of the coup. The military has been quick to detain all those they see as threats. Opposition leaders, activists, lawmakers. Around 147 people have been detained. But signs of protests are erupting across the country. Leading the resistance are students and teachers. At Yangon Dagon University, protesters displayed the three-finger salute. First seen in the movie Hunger Games and used previously in protests in Thailand. Students say they cannot stand by while the country falls to a dictatorship.
We will not come to the university if the military keeps the power. We will not cooperate with them. As long as they are in power, we will not come. We will stay at home to be against them. We will not come to the office. We cannot accept this government.
With detractors being picked up left and right, the protesters have moved online. The most popular social media site in Myanmar, Facebook, has been blocked since Monday. So people have shifted to Twitter. A civil disobedience movement has gathered steam online. People have been asked to voice their protest by banging pots and pans. So far, the protests have remained peaceful. Supporters of an arrested activist were even seen giving flowers to the police. But as global condemnation against the coup grows, protests of solidarity have erupted outside Myanmar. This is what happened in Japan.
Free, free, free Mama! Free, free, free Aung San Suu Kyi! Free, free, free Mama! Free, free Aung San Suu Kyi!
And in South Korea. While the U.S. government has threatened renewed sanctions on Myanmar, the UN Security Council took a softer stance. Russia and China prevented the United Nations Security Council from condemning the coup. The Myanmar military has said that the state of emergency will last for 1 year and pledged to hold elections after that period. But it is highly unlikely to keep its promise. The military has a history of going back on its word. In 1990, the military ignored the NLD's win and took 2 decades to transition into a democracy. For now, Myanmar's generals are back in charge and seem undeterred by global disapproval or threats of economic sanctions. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
After jailing pro-democracy voices, China is going after the young minds of Hong Kong. Sweeping new restrictions have been imposed on how schools operate in Hong Kong. For the first time after Beijing imposed a national security law, the local authorities have issued new guidelines, which brings the repressive law into the classrooms.
Let's learn about national security.
Mr. Ao, what is national security?
This looks innocent, but it isn't.
The local administrative region, which enjoys a high degree of autonomy with the implementation of one country, 2 systems.
This animated video will run across classrooms in Hong Kong. It's part of a sweeping set of measures designed to dictate how schools will operate after the national security law was enforced on Hong Kong in June last year. Students as young as 6 years of age will be made to learn the definition of terms like subversion, succession, terrorism, and colluding with foreign forces. This is a new curriculum. China wants to impart patriotic education in schools. Lessons that would instill loyalty towards mainland China. Some parents in Hong Kong are worried.
It's a pity because the original versions of general education courses did a good job of teaching everyone how to think critically. We have seen good results in recent years as the new generation really knows how to think with multiple perspectives.
I don't think this is a surprise. The government has said that national security and national education in primary and secondary schools was not sufficient. It has been mentioned so many times before that it was expected that it would be officially added to the curriculum. I am a little worried about the independent thinking abilities of primary school students in the future.
The guidelines are specific and tough. The national security education starts at the kindergarten level. Teachers are expected to teach Chinese history, Chinese culture, and moral education. At the primary level, the students will be taught how to sing the national anthem and raise the flag, while older students will have discussions on the rationale behind the law. They will also be taught the importance of Chinese institutions like the People's Liberation Army. Even private and international schools are not exempt from the new conditions. The new curriculum seems to bear the stamp of Beijing. This is not a first. China has tried to dictate the school syllabus in Hong Kong before. In 2012, one such attempt had triggered mass protests. But now there's a national security law in place. Protests are banned. The Communist Party has the license to influence the young minds of Hong Kong. A youth movement challenged China in 2019. Beijing is making sure the next generation is tutored to comply. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Our next story is about the world's most prized possession right now, vaccines. Everyone wants them. But the world doesn't have enough to go around, partly because of the shortage of supply, but mostly because rich countries have swallowed the shots even before they were ready. They made advance bookings. Countries and blocs like Australia, Britain, Israel, Japan, Switzerland, the United States and the European Union, they bought up to 51% of the global supply, more than half the global supply. And we've been reporting about this on the show. Nearly 2/3 of the global population may not have a vaccine at least until 2022. because of the advance orders that have been placed by developed nations. Some countries are resorting to extreme measures now, countries like Turkey. Turkey may swap Uyghurs for vaccines. The Uyghurs who escaped Chinese persecution are now afraid for their life. They believe Turkey will deport them in exchange for Chinese vaccines.
Sadece ben değil, herkes korkuyor. Biz de endişede yaşıyoruz zaten. Biz buradaki Türk kardeşlerimiz de bir bununla ses çıkarmasını istiyoruz. Herkes ses versin. Burada iade edilmesini istiyoruz. İade edildikten sonra iade edildiği kardeşlerimizin akıbetinin ne olacağını.
Gerçekten korkuyoruz. Çünkü Türkiye biz ikinci vatanımız. Türkiye'ni çok seviyoruz. Türk halkına, Türk hükümetine çok inanıyoruz. İnşallah böyle olmasını rica ediyoruz. Çünkü biz burada zaten kendimiz çalışarak, kendi kültürümüzü yaşatarak, çocuklarımızı burada özgürlük şekilde yaşatmak için geldik zaten.
Why is Turkey doing this? The government wanted to start its vaccination drive as early as December. They were expecting supplies of the Sinovac shot. But the shipments have been slow to arrive. Plus, Beijing has ratified a 2017 extradition deal with Turkey. This deal forces Turkey to extradite anyone with criminal charges to China. In other words, Turkey must extradite dissidents to China. Well, Turkey has not ratified this deal yet, but it has been accused of deporting Uyghurs who fled from the Chinese persecution in Xinjiang. Opposition leaders are now raising this matter. They're asking a question. Will China hold the vaccines back if Turkey does not sign the extradition deal?
If the Turkish parliament doesn't sign the extradition treaty with China, we will think, are the Chinese saying we won't send the vaccines that were requested by Turkey? This is the most critical question. The fact that this isn't transparent makes us suspicious. That's why we are asking questions.
The story has the attention of the world. Do you know why? Because Turkey's vaccine plan depends entirely on Chinese vaccines. There are no alternatives on offer yet because the Erdogan government put all its eggs in the Chinese basket. They booked 50 million doses in advance from China. What's worse, Ankara has placed its bet on a shot that has mixed results across the world. We do not even know about its efficacy. French President Emmanuel Macron raised this. He issued a warning about Chinese vaccines.
Absolutely no information about the Chinese one. I will not comment, but this is matter of fact. What it means is that on the mid to long run, it is almost sure that if this vaccine is not appropriate, it will facilitate the emergence of new variants. It will absolutely not fix the situation of these countries.
Here's what else Macron said. China's early diplomatic success in vaccine distribution is a humiliation for the Western world, for Western leaders. Macron is talking about vaccine nationalism here, the hoarding of the shots that has deprived the most vulnerable. What's shocking is how some countries are still securing supplies despite having more than enough. Case in point, Canada. Recently, Canada decided to take 1.9 million doses of COVAX. From COVAX, rather. COVAX is a global alliance for vaccine distribution. Every participant in COVAX has the right to claim doses, so nothing wrong with what Canada did per se. But why is it being panned for its decision? Because Canada has purchased more doses per capita than any other country in the world. Let me show you some numbers. Canada has bought some 200 million doses of the COVID vaccine in all. 200 million doses for a population of 38 million. Let me repeat that. 200 million doses of the Wuhan virus vaccine for 38 million people. According to one report, with that kind of supply, one Canadian citizen can get almost 10 shots. This is what vaccine hoarding looks like. At best, anyone would probably need 2 shots of a vaccine. In Canada, you can get 10. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had said that the excess supply would be donated to COVAX. No one knows when. Once again, the developing world is at the mercy of the few developed countries, and the developed world is doing everything in its power to maintain this supremacy. Let me give you one more example. India and South Africa had moved the World Trade Organization with a demand. A temporary suspension of intellectual property rules for Wuhan virus vaccines and treatments, meaning no patents. Patents make products more expensive. Rich countries did not agree. They blocked the proposal. Wealthy blocs like America, Britain, the European Union, they were vocal in their opposition. They said such a move would stifle innovation. More people are now vaccinated against the Wuhan virus than those who were infected. But we are barely scratching the surface right now. A lot more people need to be vaccinated. And this has to be done quickly. If world powers are serious about defeating the Wuhan virus, they must act. Because if we continue at the present pace, it will take 7 years for the pandemic to finally end. The world cannot afford a 7-year-long pandemic. Rich countries must be compelled to stop securing supplies from COVAX, and they must share the excess supplies they have with the developing world. As per the agreed terms of the alliance, the sin of vaccine hoarding is putting more lives at risk. You may have heard of the term oxymoron. Let me give you an example. China talking press freedom. Currently, it's obsessing over press freedom. From the Chinese Foreign Ministry to Chinese mouthpiece Global Times and state broadcaster CGTN, everyone cannot get enough of talking about freedom of press and upholding facts. Would you believe it? What do you think happened? The United Kingdom blocked CGTN, the China Global Television Network. Its license has been removed with immediate effect. Here's more.
$1.3 billion. That's how much China spends each year to increase the reach of its state media. CGTN, or the China Global Television Network, is one of its marquee projects. You will see why. China is assisting Papua New Guinea with vaccines. China is being a good neighbor to Myanmar. The PLA expels U.S. destroyer from territorial waters off Shisha Islands. This channel parrots Chinese propaganda. It spreads lies in nearly 160 countries and regions. Today, it was booted out of one. CGTN has been taken off air in the UK. Ofcom is the UK's media watchdog. It investigated CGTN and found that the channel's license holder for the UK did not have quote-unquote editorial responsibility for CGTN's output. Of course, it does not. The editorial call lies with Beijing.
China urges the BBC to take measures to eliminate the bad influence of the reports and apologize to China for the false news concerning.
The UK is not the first country to show the door to Chinese propaganda. In 2020, the United States classified 5 Chinese state media organizations as state missions. Limits were put on the number of employees they could hire. Visa for Chinese media workers too were shortened. What's ironical is that CGTN/China is now talking media freedom.
On the one hand, the UK flaunts its freedom of the press, but on the other, it disregards the facts and interferes with and obstructs CGTN's broadcasts.
Did China just say facts? Did we hear interference? Really? What exactly then was China thinking when it blocked WION? Or expelled 17 foreign workers? Or forced Australian journalists to flee? China has found its next target.
China urges the BBC to take measures to eliminate the bad influence of the reports and apologize to China for the false news concerning.
Is the BBC watching? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
We're slipping into a short break. We'll be back with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good weekend.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now.
From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries. Stories of death, destruction, despair, and hope. WION brings you to the heart of the